Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Merrill. My most recent job was at Nanyang Technological University, NTU, in Singapore, where I was working on education for sustainability in Asia. Later in my talk, I'll give you some examples of how I've worked to develop communities of practice for improving sustainability competences within and beyond NTU. Now, before I went to Singapore, I spent 8 years at a community college in California. While I was working as an anthropology instructor at Cabrillo College, I was one of a handful of faculty who volunteered to work on sustainability curriculum, prepare Cabrillo's greenhouse gas reports and climate action plan, advise student clubs around sustainability, and lead faculty development in sustainability. I've just recently been appointed to the advisory board of the National Ecology and Environment Foundation of India, and I was made an honorary life member of the Indian Society for Life Cycle Assessment in recognition of the work I've done throughout the last decade in promoting higher education for sustainability. So why is higher education for sustainability my particular passion? As you probably know, global civilization may be in some peril thanks to our current unsustainable practices. We're well outside the safe operating space when it comes to things like biodiversity and soil health, land use, and climate. It's evident that most of the industry and policy decisions that got us into this mess were made by well-educated leaders. It wasn't a lack of education that got us here, so much as what is and isn't included in higher education, which is why I'm committed to transforming that system. So today I'm going to talk about some things that I believe, ways that higher education can contribute to economic, social, and environmental sustainability. The questions I'm going to invite us to consider include what are some of the larger systems that interact with higher education institutions? How can a university improve sustainability from the top down? What is a university's role in regional sustainability and climate resilience collaborations? How do we scale the kind of intensive experiences that students get in co-curricular settings so that it reaches more students? What will it take to make sustainability a part of the formal curricular education experience of all students? What's needed to grow an integrated, interdisciplinary community of practice for sustainability? And then how can we weave sustainability competences throughout the fabric of higher education institutions? I believe that higher education needs to improve its performance in helping all students to develop sustainability competences. Many papers and books have included lists of sustainability competences that university graduates should have. For this talk, I'm going to focus on Wiek et al.'s 5 key competences because it provides a simple distillation of the main concern of many other such lists. Now, they start out with systems thinking. They include complexity and interdisciplinarity in this competence. They also talk about anticipatory competence, being able to envision and articulate potential futures. Normative competences, being able to productively discuss, negotiate, and evaluate different ideas around ethics, beliefs, values. Interpersonal competences, being able to work with others, particularly in diverse settings around potentially contentious issues. And finally, strategic competences, being able to go from vision to plan to action and successful completion of a plan. To successfully address sustainability, I think it's critical to remember that we're dealing with the interactions of complex adaptive systems at different scales. For instance, economies are complex adaptive systems that are embedded in larger social systems, which in turn are embedded in ecosystems. To promote sustainability at all levels, I find it most useful to seek connections and solutions that integrate social justice issues, like providing livelihoods and social structures that promote fairness, human dignity, and happiness. Without these, people will suffer, and suffering people are much more inclined to make bad, short-sighted decisions. Things like starting armed conflicts against corrupt governments over control of access to high-value resources, like they did in Zaire in 1996, and like they did in Aceh province in Indonesia in the late 1990s, with terrible consequences for people, for habitats, and for the great apes that I had gone to both places to study. Universities are themselves complex adaptive systems that interact with economic, social, and environmental systems at a variety of scales. So for higher education to improve sustainability, you need to be able to take a whole systems approach within the higher education institution. You do need to look at infrastructure, operations and procurement, research mission at universities, student life, co-curricular and extracurricular activities, and of course the formal curriculum. One of the larger external systems that shapes the way universities respond to the challenges of sustainability is through campus ratings. For instance, in Southeast Asia, the most popular rating system around sustainability was University of Indonesia's Green Metric. Now, the UI Green Metric only devotes 18% of its points to education. The rest is mostly about infrastructure and operations. This is somewhat similar to what may be more familiar here in North America, the STARS program from ASHE. STARS only awards 20% of its points based on curriculum. It does include planning, research, and community engagement, but operations is still the largest category. Now, Penn State, you should hopefully be familiar with this because actually you've done fairly well. Under the STARS program, you were awarded a gold rating, and that's in large part due to very high scores in research, pretty good in engagement, in planning and administration. But in operations and in curriculum, you only got about half of the available points. A whole systems approach can be driven by the mission and vision stated by the university. Also, if your focus is on the provision of education, this can include intentions for graduate attributes or core competences for the university's graduating students. For example, when I was at Cabrillo College, every classroom had the mission and the core 4 competencies posted and quite visible. Talks about the skills that students need to succeed and are expected to have by the time they complete their Associate of Arts or Associate of Sciences degrees. Communication, critical thinking and information competency, global awareness, and personal and professional responsibility. You can see how a lot of these actually overlap with the 5 key competences in sustainability as described by Wiek et al. In some ways, this is even more clear with Nanyang Technological University's 5 Cs. So these are their graduate attributes or competences: character, creativity, competence, communication, and civic-mindedness. Again, there are many areas in which these can be seen to overlap. Character is really about normative competence. Creativity can involve strategic and systems thinking competences. Their competence is about strategic and anticipatory competences. Communication is about interpersonal competences, and civic-mindedness includes strategic and normative competences. You can participate in developing such competence goals to be sure that they include sustainability considerations. But even with goals already in place, you can leverage that to work with programs and instructors in aligning their student learning outcomes to these goals through a sustainability competence focus. I wasn't able to find a listing of graduate attributes or competences for Penn State, but I did see that the mission was in fact on most of the web pages. Down there at the bottom of every website, it talked about teaching students to be leaders with a global perspective, systems thinking, conducting research that improves lives, well, that's normative and anticipatory competence, contributing millions to the economy, and sharing expertise. These can be viewed as strategic and interpersonal competences. I did also find that the Sustainability Institute itself lists its values as part of the Institute's strategic plan. I was especially excited, first of all, that you talk about evidence-based action, actually using research to understand what works, collaborative inquiry, tapping into the power of social learning. And I was especially pleased to see humble listening in there. I think that's a key component of interpersonal competences. Many sustainability competences can be enhanced by building community relationships. Interactions with external organizations and stakeholders can foster resilience throughout the university's broader eco-cultural system, while providing opportunities for co-creation and learning. At NTU, this was mostly expressed through their Eco-Campus initiative. It was focused on test bedding various sustainability projects on campus, largely through industry partnerships. I was involved in testing the Powers phone app, which was a way to promote energy conservation behaviors in students, faculty, and staff on campus. At Cabrillo, we were part of the Monterey Bay Regional Climate Action Compact. It was great to be involved in this regional partnership. We were able to find opportunities for student internships. We were able to benefit from research by our university partners, the local universities, and it focused on local projects for reducing or for carbon offsets. Cabrillo also brought in community partners by hosting integrated events. The Social Justice Conference attracted many local organizations to participate. I made sure that it always featured a session and some organizations dedicated to environmental justice issues. We know that clubs and co-curricular events give engaged students experiential sustainability skills and leadership training opportunities. How do we make these opportunities available to more students? As advisor to the Sustainability Council and actively engaged with other faculty and the students in other sustainability-related groups, I found that there were excellent learning opportunities for students. They were able to make connections between what they were learning in their classes and some real-world challenges and opportunities. Now, to get those kinds of experiences available to more students, we can leverage the power of exponential growth in student social networks. We did this when I was working with the Digital Bridge Academy, which was a program for improving recruitment and retention of high-risk students. We had some students who'd completed their first semester experience, and then we gave them support to do outreach in their neighborhoods and communities. But I see the core mission of higher education institutions still being expressed as formal education. How do we get sustainability into that curricular experience of all students? And this has been a major focus of my research over the last year or so. I've been working on this project with Rodrigo Lozano. Now, it turns out I'm not at NTU anymore, so I hope to be in an even better place when we do get this published. We were working on connecting competences to pedagogical approaches. One thing I kept coming across in this research is that the pedagogies that are suggested and promoted for sustainability are the same pedagogies that are suggested and promoted in general as better for learning. So what's considered good pedagogy is often, perhaps inadvertently, pretty good pedagogy for sustainability. What we were doing was looking at specific pedagogies and how they align with specific competences. Again, we looked at a lot of subcomponents within those 5 key competences described by Wiek et al., but I'll try to keep it simple by focusing on these. So this is what we're developing, is this matrix that talked about and then described the linkages between sustainability, pedagogies, and competences. This is extremely simplified and truncated. But I'm going to walk you through some examples based on some of the courses that I taught at Cabrillo. So first we'll look at this course I developed and taught called Surviving the Future, the Reemergence of Sustainable Cultures. And the core of this course was a team project for students to research local sustainability problems and propose solutions. So I had them working in what I was calling interlocking teams, and what I later learned is essentially a variant on what's called a jigsaw pedagogy, because I believed it would maximize their social learning opportunities and help empower student expertise. Now, the jigsaw pedagogy was developed in 1971 by L.A. Aronson as a way to help integrated classrooms overcome racial cliques and other problems. But I didn't know about that when I set this up. What I knew was my field research on orangutans. And a piece of the research I had done on orangutans was actually comparing different orangutan populations. And we found that social learning is a key to complex cultural behaviors and adaptability. Those populations of orangutans that had high social tolerance, well, you see 2 patterns emerging. Individuals are spending more time in proximity with other adult individuals, and that means that they have more opportunities to learn any new behavior because they're together more often. Also, in populations where orangutans had higher social tolerance, they had a greater diversity of social partners, meaning that they had more possible models, more potential innovators to observe. So you put those 2 factors together and you realize they're going to be exposed to a larger repertoire of potentially adaptive behaviors. They'll know how to do more things in order to get the resources they need out of the environment more efficiently. If they get good at that, it might mean that they're making more efficient use of the habitat. More orangutans can fit into smaller space within that habitat, and there's actually reduced competition for resources. And if that competition is a little less, then it's easier to be more socially tolerant. Now, we don't know for sure that this has happened as a reinforcing feedback loop in orangutans. We suspect that this is what happened in our earliest human ancestors that made us so good and so focused on social learning. Now, with the jigsaw or interlocked teams as a pedagogy, you might end up developing some aspects of systems thinking. You almost certainly have opportunities to develop aspects of interpersonal and strategic key competences. Another part of that assignment was essentially problem-based learning. You've probably heard of this. It's one of the best studied active learning pedagogies. And problem-based learning fairly reliably contributes to some systems, thinking, and strategic competences. But depending on the kinds of problems, you can actually contribute to learning under all 5 of those key competences. I also taught introductory courses in anthropology, especially the Introduction to Biological Anthropology. And I worked with colleagues who were teaching cultural anthropology courses. And in these, we included a very simplified product or commodity life cycle analysis to connect students to the global and social implications of everyday familiar items. In doing this kind of life cycle or supply chain research, students are almost certain to exercise systems thinking, and they're very likely to develop some normative and strategic competences as well. So I find this approach useful for understanding what I'm already providing as a teacher. But of course, where it should be even more useful is when you're designing or redesigning a course and you want to address a specific competence. Like you want to make sure that students develop the competence within systems thinking of contextualizing knowledge. What pedagogy should you use for that course? Well, you could use community service learning, critical emancipatory pedagogy, or supply chain and life cycle research pedagogies. One of the most interesting suggested competences that I've come across under strategic competences is ambiguity and frustration tolerance. I think many of us have opportunities to try to develop our competence in this on a daily, if not hourly basis. Thankfully, I wasn't able to find any pedagogies that always produce opportunities to deal with ambiguity and frustration, but students are likely to get some experience if they're involved in a course that has interdisciplinary team teaching, depending on how the teachers model their differences. Courses in community service learning pretty frequently come across this in addition to problem-based learning. Now, what was really interesting was I looked at an article that came out about some Penn State students in a program called, I think it's Cause, and these students were looking at climate change and wetlands. And 2 of the students in their interviews for this article mentioned this as a need for flexibility or patience. And as one said, it's because things don't always happen exactly like they're supposed to. Alyssa Menzel said that, and I just thought that was a really great illustration of this. So the reason that Rodrigo and I are working on this is to help provide a connection between aims in sustainability education and how you deliver those by systematically linking competences with pedagogies. We think this will be helpful to lecturers, program designers, policymakers. So if the goal is that all university graduates develop competences in sustainability, we should be working toward developing and exhibiting those competences everywhere that students are in the university. All of the people who make the decisions or who interact with the students should at least have some familiarity with them. One of the best strategies for promoting competence development in working adults is through a community of practice. Lev and Wagner noticed this kind of social learning structure in groups of working adults, mutually engaged in a joint enterprise, and developing a shared repertoire of ideas, vocabularies, and solutions. Wenger looked more closely into how a community of practice develops. If you want to grow a community of practice around sustainability, you're going to be challenged to integrate a lot of diverse and complex concepts and perspectives. In fact, you're going to have to exercise some systems thinking competences. You'll be working together to guide development of the practice, so you need to have some anticipatory competences. You'll be developing shared values and principles, exercising normative competences. Of course, the heart of a community of practice is social engagement, meaning interpersonal competences will be very important. And one of the things a community of practice works toward is solving current problems in the practice, utilizing strategic competences. So I found that there's a beautiful symmetry in the fact that successfully developing a community of practice is also an opportunity to apply and develop sustainability competences. I did this within NTU, developing and coordinating sustainability salons, which became more of a community of interest as we began to talk much more about theory and research and a little bit less about practical things. But I also was one of the founders of a small community of practice around scholarship for teaching and learning. My main role while I was at NTU was actually to help develop a broader international community of practice. We had participants from countries that represented half the world's population. I organized 3 of the 4 conferences so far that have brought these people together. And I'm the lead editor on a book that we're doing. The manuscript's almost done. It's under contract at Routledge, so this should come out next year. From what I've experienced in my work in Southeast Asia, in Africa, in India, and even in California, and from what I've learned as a presenter and participant in international conferences and groups of communities of sustainability advocates, there's a clear need to consider sustainability at all levels, from the global to the local to the individual. In summary, my recommendations for how we weave sustainability competences into the fabric of the universities would be to really work on nurturing sustainability competences in everyone. Don't just try to get students to learn it. Make sure that everyone has developed these. To integrate environmental, social, and economic concerns whenever we talk about sustainability. To promote the scholarship of teaching and learning, to promote better pedagogy, because again, that's a great way to get better pedagogy for sustainability. To harness the power of reinforcing feedback and exponential network growth. And most importantly, to cultivate alliances and build communities. Even orangutans benefit from more opportunities to learn from one another. People are eager to do meaningful work, so it's not hard to find allies who want to help change the world for the better. I look forward to opportunities to do this work with you and to hearing what questions you have. Thank you.